Hey, hi again. This is going to be a postscript from the video that I done on the Afro-Dominicans denying their blackness. I want to add about what also helped me uh, overcome not liking my blackness. I was I had taken a DNA test because I was curious to know, what am I? What part of Africa am I from? And I already know my European ancestry. I wanted to know what African ancestry I was. My mother had told me that her grandmother was Indian, according to her mother telling her. And so I initially was like they have in with DNA testing, what they call the mitochondrial DNA. And what that is, in essence, is your mother had a mother who had a mother, and so on. And this particular mitochondrial DNA is only passed on through that lineage. And so I always thought that it was going to be Caribbean. So I really didn't, I didn't want to waste my money in doing that because I was interested in knowing about my African ancestry. So doing a mitochondrial DNA wouldn't fit. But I said to myself, well, you want to do this DNA testing and you're trying to get the relatives of yours uh, to do this. You should always start with yourself first as a foundation. And you can't ask someone to do something for you if you haven't done it for yourself first. So with that as a premise, I said, okay, let me just take the DNA test and whatever. So what if I see if it has a Native American on it? Well, to my surprise, folks, there was no Native American DNA. My mitochondrial DNA originates, according to science, in Central Africa, primarily in the country of Gabon. And so I initially was taken back. So, and I kind of felt like, man, here I'm wanting to get somebody else's DNA to do, someone who I know who has the black mother background, to do my DNA thing, so I can use that line to embrace that African heritage, even though it's not my mother's mother's mother, but it's maybe my father's mother, something like that. So here I'm doing mine. I'm worried about trying to get somebody else's. So that's why the initial, taking back, because I'm look for something and I actually had it to start with. So I said, oh wow, okay. And it's one of the oldest DNAs that they have around. They said it's over 100,000 years old. But again, if you believe in the Bible, they say that we've only been on this planet for 6,000 years. So I don't know which is true. But either way, I have a African mitochondrial DNA. But I started thinking about it and I said, wow. And then it dawned on me that here my grandmother, um, she had an olive complexion, um, a flat face. She was not too short, she was over 5 feet. Um, and she's from the Caribbean, um, from Martinique, but she also lived in Dominica. And she, as a in her in her early 20s, she lived in Buenos Aires, which is in Argentina. So I think that's also why I thought she might have been Native American because she did live in South America. But to find out, well, see, not only did my mitochondrial DNA say that it was African, but I later got what's called a autosomal um, DNA check. That one considers your genes on both sides of your family, and it gives like percentages of how much of what that your genes consist of. And that one showed that I'm 50.85% African, West African, and they suggested that is from the Mandinka tribe. But again, you can't really know specifically tribe, but you can know region in Africa, and so for me, um, half of that heritage was from West Africa, and then the other half was from France and Spain. But I know it can't be Spain because it's Portuguese. But again, Portugal and Spain are right next to each other. So I just leave it as that. But it had 0% Native American. I have no Native American in me. So it was quite telling and eye-opening for me because at that point when I discovered I have no Native American and I started thinking about this grandmother of mine who I guess would be my great grandmother who was supposed to be Indian, that most likely what she was a light-skinned black, what we call mulatto, and she, I guess in order to survive in that society, to living in Latin America or South America, to admit that you have an African ancestry is going to limit you, I guess. And again, in history, um, anyone that was known to have black ancestry, or obviously, a person of color, you can get kidnapped. You can actually be a free person and walking and minding your own business, and any white person could kidnap you and sell you. And so just like in the movie 12 Years a Slave, and that's in essence what that movie is about, a middle class black man, a family man, gets kidnapped and gets tortured and is forced into slavery. So I attribute what my great grandmother might have said this in order to um, survive in her environment, and she was involved with a European man. So I guess this is what she had to do to survive, or maybe she just assumed because just like myself, I didn't know what I was. I just know that I'm living in Queens and. Um, my mother looks what she looks like, my father looks like what he looks like, and I'm in the middle. And history of slavery was never brought up in my house. And slavery teaching about slavery in school was very minimal. But I know I always felt uncomfortable about the subject because I knew that somehow I was included. And that I was afraid of. But so to discover that my great grandmother was not a mestizo, but a mulatto, that then I said, that meant that it was a slave woman that survived the transatlantic trip from Africa to the Caribbean. And it started to, I felt a sense of pride actually, which sounds very odd, but I'll explain what I mean. I was in the military. I was in the Navy, and I was stationed on a very, a big ship, and we did a transatlantic from, you know, from what's that? From Virginia all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, and we actually did go to Africa, and I would imagine when I'm sleeping in my bunk. A bunk is another name for your bed, and the seas out there is very rough, especially during the winter time. And I was imagining that I'm on a slave ship, and what that ancestor of mine, what they went through. Here I'm on a big luxury ship. I mean, you know, humongous ship. And these ships from back then, they weren't near as big and not near as well constructed. And so just imagine those people and that that ancestor who was a woman on that ship. She survived it, and she survived long enough to have children. And that's when that sense of pride came into me. That here a woman survived that. And you know what else? Before the Pilgrims, what's known as the Pilgrims that came to what do you call it, Boston, well, Massachusetts, you had a ship from Europe, but they were all white men. And when they came to, I think it was Virginia I think it was Virginia where they landed in, or what's known as Virginia today. And the mass majority of those people perished before the first year ended, you know. And here these are white men, and here they couldn't even survive a year in the Americas. So I think about my grandma, my ancestors, and that they survived. I said that's what really got my pride, and I started to feel confident about myself. So if you come from the West Indies or South America or Central America and you have Black heritage or mixed heritage, you think about that. You think about that. That woman, that slave woman, that captive survived, or your grandfathers, they survived also, and they survived long enough to have you. And because of that, you have to give them honor and respect. Let's stop respecting the enemy of who brought us here. You know, start becoming aware of what's going on and what's really being done to you. So I, in addition to this, I started thinking about, I said, I really do need to educate myself about my heritage. All my life, I learned lies about Black people, about myself, and being told I was a bad and dirty person. I want to save up my money and go to West Africa. They have some trips, transatlantic trip. No, I'm sorry. No, you have to fly over there. But if I can find a transatlantic trip to the west coast of Africa, I would do it. But either way, um, I would like to save my money to do the west coast of Africa, and I want to visit where they kept the slaves, in those dungeons, and the ships and the artifacts from that time. I want to my desire in doing that is to really what they call full circle, to um, go back to where it started and to bring closure and to bring healing. Our ancestors didn't get that healing. Here they perished. Many of our ancestors jumped overboard, and maybe the child was still on board, but they lost it mentally, and a lot of suicides, or many of us were actually thrown overboard um, to hide the evidence that they were involved in the slave trade. It was horrible. And so I think something like that is not to be ashamed of, but to say, you have value, you know, that you have so much value that you have people willing to do such extreme measures to just capture your body. So your body is valuable, and we have to learn to make money for ourselves. Here we're always trying to make money for somebody else. Let's start to make money for ourselves rather than someone else, and have a new sense of pride in who you are. So this was my postscript to my prior video, and so I just say, keep on keeping on. God loves us, and so we should believe that and move forward. Take care.